Phil Robertson of Duck Dynasty fame has sadly been diagnosed with the early stages of Alzheimer's and a blood disease. And today, two of his sons, Al and Jase, are here to give us an update on how he's doing and also to talk about his legacy, the times that he has shared the gospel with specifically President Trump, how that went, but also just his legacy of boldness, of telling the truth, of bringing people to repentance, as well as the love and hospitality that their mom has shown. And so you're really going to enjoy this. I was really uplifted by this, but also you'll be given some specific prayer requests for their family. We'll also be talking about the reboot of Duck Dynasty with the new generations of the Robertson family. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Good Ranchers. Go to goodranchers.com, code Allie. That's goodranchers.com, code Allie. Al, Jase, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. I so appreciate y'all and just truly love y'all's show so much. First, I want to talk about Phil's diagnoses. We haven't been seeing as much or hearing as much from him lately. So, Jase, could you tell us what's going on?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer because, we're kind of in the bowels of the new normal, and we realize that families across the globe have this same problem. Your parents get old and things start going south physically. And basically, the diagnosis that was given to us is he has some kind of blood disorder, and they likened it to blood cancer where it kind of attacks his bones.
Hmm.
And so he's had multiple back fractures and even one in his tailbone. And so he'll have to go do these procedures because they're not really correctable.
Yeah.
They just do a procedure that makes it stop hurting, which is, from my understanding, kind of giving you the redneck version of what I was told, is they're basically just putting cement in his back.
Hmm.
But your back is not designed to have cement in it.
Well,
Right.
especially
And
for sections that don't have cement.
yeah, it's supposed to be flexible. And so, you kind of have to, meanwhile, you have another diagnosis, which they said he has the early stages of Alzheimer's. And they're like, it's a form of it. I'm not sure they exactly know what he has, but it's a form of Alzheimer's. And so they're kind of working against each other because every time he has to go under for a procedure, and they say sometimes that going under anesthesia progresses these kind of mental states, it's like it's harder for him to come back
Mm-hmm.
to reality. And so, he, having said all that, it's kind of been stages over the last few months where what we call new normals. And we used to say that with my daughter, who was born with a craniofacial issue. And my wife said that one time. She said, well, this is just the new normal, because every time something would happen, it would create other problems. And so that's kind of where we are. Because overall, when people say, well, how's Phil doing? It's hard to explain that in a one sentence. Overall, not great, because he looks, what's the best word to use for that?
Emaciated.
Yeah, he just doesn't look well. It's kind of shocking when people come visit him. He's lost so much weight.
Yeah, he's gotten real thin.
We've tried to do everything imaginable in the world to put weight on him. And it's not that he's not eating. He is just literally, his body is not putting on weight. So
Yeah, just not reacting. And, my answer, Allie, is when people ask me, I say, well, it's day to day, literally, because we see
It
him a
is.
lot. And so one day he may be a little bit stronger mentally and physically than another day. And so you kind of just, it's like that. You walk into it not sure what to expect. And, our podcast audience obviously loves Dad. And it was his podcast to begin with. Jason and I just kind of tagged along at the beginning.
I was a guest that never left.
Yeah, Jace was the guest we never got rid of. And so, we started noticing it on the podcast, Jason and I probably before anybody else. But even now that our audience knows, they could kind of look back and see. And so those signs were there, I think, early on the Alzheimer's side. But Jase is right. This physical thing has just basically fast forwarded probably his decline into that. But I will say this. My dad taught Jason and I and our brothers and our family and anybody that would listen that his life was in preparation of the great resurrection. And so he said for years, the resurrection looms larger. And he's living that even now. I mean, like the idea is that we're not like super depressed about it or like just devastated by it. We hate it. It's hard to watch. It's hard to be a part of a man that's always been so strong in your life. But at the same time, we realize that the spiritual battle goes forward. So that's just kind of how we've approached it. That's why we're still doing the podcast and still talking about Jesus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
First sponsor is We Heart Nutrition. I used to start ads by saying this is a women's supplement company, but it's not just a women's supplement company anymore. It is a women's and men's supplement company, but it is the same Christian family-owned company bringing you incredible supplements in the most bioavailable form. I've talked about how this has been a game changer for my health. I'm just healthier. I feel better. My immune system works better. I think Chief Relatable does too, since he started taking this. And I am just so glad to finally have vitamins that seem to be really working for my body. Their much anticipated magnesium glycinate product is now available. I take this every day. It promotes better sleep. It's gentle on the stomach, has maximum absorption. It promotes relaxation, aids in a muscle recovery. It supports hormonal balance. Also, I take their iron every day, and that really seems to be working according to my blood work. You need to figure out what vitamins are right for you, though. So I would go to weheartnutrition.com, take their 20-second quiz. They will tell you the vitamin regimen that is right for your age, for your stage of life, for your needs. Go to weheartnutrition.com. When you check out, use code Allie. You'll get 20% off. weheartnutrition.com, code Allie.
And I'll just kind of piggyback on that. When we went public with this, because obviously something was going on, and for people like me, I don't do social media. I basically live in a cave. And so I think I forget sometimes that there's a lot of people who watch our family. And I just started noticing everywhere I went, like grocery store, it's, how's your dad? And it is compounded that times 1,000 when we went public with it. And so I realized, okay, we need to go public with this. And so we did. But I will say in that moment was the first time, I would say in 6 months, that I felt like his spirit became better.
Yeah.
And I just really believe, more now than ever, the power of prayer, and you get as many people praying for my dad. And we're very grateful for that, because in all this kind of sadness and debilitating illness that he has, that there's no cure. I had 1,000 people reach out to me and say, well, try this and try that. But we have a team of doctors working round the clock and doing all this. But when I noticed when I went down there, because I had actually called my kids and said, look, if you want to see Papa Phil, you need to do it right now, because I was thinking that he only had a few days to live. This was, I guess, right before we went public. And when we went public with it, I was amazed, because I took my son down there, and he was like, well, he's doing a lot better than I thought. And I said, well, it's news to me. This is the best I've seen him in months. And so I just chalked it up to answered prayer. And since then, I will say that most days, despite whatever, if he's in pain or if he's just checked out mentally, there's a spirit about him that's at peace. And it's really helped us the past few weeks dealing with what we're having to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, and we attribute that. Allie, you'll appreciate this. One of the things I said on the podcast the day we talked about it and kind of went public with everything with Dad is I remember being so moved, because Reagan was the first president I ever voted for. And, Reagan got to a point in his life journey where he had Alzheimer's. And so basically he had to step back from the public eye. And when he did that, he wrote a letter, and then he read the letter. And when you go out and visit the Reagan Library, the last thing you do before you go out and visit where his tomb is him reading that letter. And I just remember sitting there in tears, so appreciative that he explained why he was leaving the stage. And I told our audience, I said, Dad didn't write a letter because this happened pretty fast. But you know what? He doesn't have to, because there are living letters that keep going forward. It starts with us, me, Jase, his sons, his daughter, and it continues into everybody he's impacted for the kingdom. And so there are all these living letters out there that are pointing back to Jesus, because it's really never about us. And so in a sense, I have that sort of same peace about his goal and our goal and what we're doing.
Well, thank y'all so much for sharing that. How's your mom doing?
Well, that's another developing story.
How many podcasts you got going today? Out of that,
she keeps falling, and despite all the struggles we've had, we've always used humor as, I guess, a way to cope. There's no doubt about that, and a lot of people take that wrong, because we laugh together, even about things that are not funny. But I think it's because we all know, we have each other's back, and we love each other, and it's a way to soothe this. I preface what I'm going to say, because for some reason, when you have these problems in your family, I'm sure families identify with this, people get declared the spokesman for dealing with the parents, who can become difficult. And so Willie and me have actually been declared, we have to go talk to my mom and dad when they don't want to do things that need to be done. And so yesterday, Willie and I had to go out there because my mom had a fall, and this is a common thing. She cannot stay upright. And my dad, if he's in his right mind, will make a joke every time. He's like, she's too top heavy. He's like trying to correct the problem now from this. And, we laugh. But, I mean, my mom fell, I guess that's been a week ago.
About a week and a half.
And she severely cut her leg. In fact, I was getting up on stage fixing to speak in Kentucky at an event. And we have multiple people that basically stay with them 24/7, and sent me a picture, said, we're taking your mom to the hospital. But he sent me a picture of her wound, and it was horrific.
Ugh.
And because in the moment, I'm literally getting up on stage, and because I thought it was life threatening, because it just looked so terrible on her leg. It was to the bone on her leg, right at her kneecap. And fortunately, they got her fixed up. I mean, she has multiple stitches and she's in a brace. But so for a small period of time, we said, look, we need to keep y'all up here with us. And so we can keep an eye, because my dad is day to day, and my mom, she can't walk. And so we were like, and we're feeding them, and they're food snobs. And which is funny, because in my family,
they taught us to be.
We're all food snobs. I mean, they want the best of the best of the best. And what that has evolved to is basically their immediate family cooking for them the greatest meals that we can prepare.
Multiple times a day, if possible.
So we're like, look, y'all are so far away from us, you can't walk. And so they didn't want to do that. And, because they're at an age where they're not thinking rationally. And it's asking a lot for other people. And so Willie and I had to go out there because my mom was the problem, And it was a difficult conversation. And so, because she wants to be at her home, and I get it.
They've lived there 50 years.
We're like, you can go back, but let's heal up.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, well, I got all my stuff. And we're like, we will put an armed guard at your house that will look over your dogs and your gun, which we actually did. I'm not making that up. So if anybody,
we have an armed redneck nearby,
gets
so
wind of
don't
this
mess with their stuff.
and wants to go check out their stuff, But, they're at an age where I'm saying they're not thinking about all these things. But after an hour of a difficult conversation, we had a good laugh about it. And because I'm like, Willie's like stating the obvious. Kay, you can't walk. Phil doesn't know where he is on, on a given day, which my dad laughs about it. He's acknowledging that. And so that's kind of where we're at. But she's doing better. I mean, I thought it was a lot more severe.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a severe injury, but she's really seems to be doing well.
Well, and the most fun thing with them, Allie, is they have transition that humor to us. I think it's why we had a successful show on national television. Last night, went over and cooked hamburgers for them. It was our night to cook. And so mom's eating her hamburger and she's finishing it up, and dad doesn't eat as much. So he only ate half of his. And he looked over at mom's plate and he said, "Miss Kay, you had quite the appetite." and I looked at mom and she said, "That's what we're here for." And she put her hands up like that. And I got so tickled because that's the way they've always been. So it's like nothing will change that interaction and that dynamic,
they haven't lost that.
Funny. They haven't lost it.
Yeah, I'll share this story that happened because I was given the bad. But, my mom, they're not getting, as fed as much in the word. I mean, these people are, my parents, they are warriors for the Lord. I mean, they have brought tens of thousands of people to the Lord. And
Dad's worn out more Bibles than, I've owned.
Yeah, and my mom is the best of us as far as her hospitality and treating every person on the planet like they're the most spectacular person. She's done this our whole life. Yeah. I mean, like we'll go to a football game or, we took them to the Saints game because she's a big Saints fan. And she basically hung out with all the people that were selling the concession products, just talking about food.
We'd be in the Trump Hotel in New York City, and she comes over, knocks on my door, and says, "I want you to meet Elisa. She's my new best friend," and she's like the lady cleaning the rooms. I mean, that's mom.
He's always had that quality, which is to me a Jesus quality, and them together is why I think they've made such a big impact. But I was getting a little frustrated because it is frustrating, and because you're trying to get them to realize the new normal is that you just being here talking with our kids and your grandkids, and this is life. If you can just look at this, because my dad's a quarterback famously, and he doesn't like being on the sidelines. And my mom, I say this affectionately, she's the diva of her family also. She loves attention, and so it's hard for them to be in a house, in a room, sitting. And so she mentioned, she said, "Well, maybe you can just give me a sermon or something." She said it frustratingly. And I just thought, well, okay, I'll give you one. And she was like, "Well, go ahead."
Jase will preach at the drop of a hat, Allie.
I will. That. I was doing some study about the afterlife because we had talked about that on a previous podcast, Allie. And I said, you remember that when Jesus was on the cross and he told the thief next to him, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." And I said, there's been books written and everybody wonders, what is this paradise you speak? What is it like? And you probably won't find, 5 people who can agree on exactly what he meant by that. Right. And so that's how I opened the line, which I noticed both of their heads just snapped to me and they were glued to me. And I said, but I think we're missing the key point of that phrase, what Jesus said, is that he said, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." And I said, just think of what paradise is as far as it relates to the Bible. It's all about relationship, God wanting to dwell with people. And I just went on from there, quoted a lot of other verses. I talked for almost an hour about, we get to experience life with the eternal Son. We have his spirit on the earth, and we will do this forever. And I really, it impacted them because they've been talking about it ever since. But then I realized that, it's hard for human beings to deal with struggles and death. I mean, they're literally, at the end of their life, and they realize that, and that's okay. We're fine with that.
What's your line, Jase? It's not the destination, but it's who you go on the journey with.
Exactly. I use that illustration. I said, if because my mom always wants to go anywhere. Are you ready to go? Yeah. And then she always says, well,
where are we going?
Yeah, who's going? And then it's like, where we're going is irrelevant. It's like, let's line out who's going. And so I thought it was a wonderful moment. I mean, I felt like the Spirit kind of moved me in there in a frustrating conversation we were having and I think they needed that, in the moment.
Second sponsor is Crowd Health. Crowd Health is a platform that offers an alternative to traditional health insurance by utilizing a community-driven crowdfunding model to manage health care expenses. So I don't have to tell you how complicated and burdensome the health insurance world can be. It's expensive. It's frustrating. Claim denials are becoming more and more common. In fact, 1 in 5 Obamacare claims were denied last year. That's totally unacceptable. I mean, when you're going through a health emergency, the last thing that you want to do, the last thing that you need to do is to argue with your health insurance company. And so you can opt out of the health insurance world altogether, and you can opt into Crowd Health. So here's how it works. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the events of an emergency. You get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you join the crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for $99 a month for your first 3 months by using my code Allie at joincrowdhealth.com. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com, code Allie. A few years ago when Phil was on my show, he told a story about sharing the gospel with President Trump. And I'm sure you guys know a lot of stories that the public doesn't know about your dad just sharing the gospel. Like, Al, you just said Jase can preach at the drop of a hat. I feel like Phil, just from what I know, I mean, he'll share the gospel with anyone at the drop of a hat. And he'll do it, I think, in the clearest way that I've heard. Like, I've said that multiple times privately and publicly. I think Phil Robertson is one of the clearest explainers of the gospel in the most simple but profound terms that I've heard. And I've heard a lot of really good preachers, and I value, the articulateness of a lot of people, but he's just really clear. So I was wondering if, like, any instances come to your mind of watching your dad share the gospel with someone.
Well, there's several, but one I want to share is the first time I ever heard him do it publicly, other than our church, obviously teaching a class. I was very young and the business was very new. And Dad used to go and speak at a lot of Ducks Unlimited banquets, raising funds for them. But it was kind of getting his name out there and getting our duck call business out there. But these are usually events where there's a lot of alcohol. And so it's just not the best. But, sometimes he would try to share Jesus, but it always didn't go over so great. But we were in New Orleans one time in the Superdome, and we had a booth there. And Jason, I don't remember if you were there or not, but Dad gets up, and there's about 400 people. Most of them are Cajuns, from South Louisiana. And Anheuser-Busch was the sponsor of the event.
Yeah, it wasn't a church event.
It wasn't a church event. And so there's a big, huge sign hanging above Dad that said, Anheuser-Busch, King of Beers. I'll never forget it. And Dad gets up, and he does his duck call demonstration. Of course, all the people out there are drinking their, Budweisers and loving it. And, that Phil, he good on the duck call, and they're talking. And then all of a sudden, he reaches into his bag, and he pulls out his Bible. And it just got deathly quiet. And he looks up at that sign and he says, Anheuser-Busch, he really is the king of beers. Back in the day, boys, I used to drink a mini a Budweiser, but that led me down a bad road. and
so everybody's looking completely.
Yeah, everybody's looking like, what's he doing? And he held up his Bible and he says, he may be the king of beers, but let me tell you a little something about the King of Kings. And then he just shared the gospel with this group. And they were so shocked. Of course, they hid their beer behind their leg, under their chairs, because all of a sudden we done broke out into a church meeting here in the Superdome. and he shared the gospel. And I just remember him walking off stage, and it was kind of a moderate applause. They weren't sure how to react.
Yeah.
And a guy was standing there that sold duck calls, and he said, "Phil, you can't mix up your religion and your business. You'll lose them both." And I remember him saying to this guy, he said, did you not hear what I was talking about? Dead men coming out of the ground, sins being removed. He was like, without Christ, there would be no business. And so I think that set the culture for not only our company, but our family. And so everything we do, you're right, is a fruit that comes from being a part of him. So,
Yeah, I would echo that. He has a talent about saying very blunt things that people seem to not be that offended about.
Right.
There's something, and I think maybe it comes from his past, which was so broken, and he's so transparent about and vulnerable about. I mean, they made a movie about it, and he was fine with it. But you brought up Trump because, I mean, I got to hear that, and the tone of the conversation. Of course, they wanted our support, but then he was asking more about what can we do, as political government officials to help like you people. And my dad gave him 0 things. He said, here's what you need to do. He said, now I know I don't have to ask you whether you're a sinner or not. We know, what you've done. And it was kind of but it wasn't tense at all.
Right.
And he talked
a guy
about
like Trump appreciates
sin and death, and he's like, "Hey, you're not getting any younger, and there's people after you." He was actually kind of predicting, the prophecy about.
This was back in 16, so yeah,
exactly. He was like, "Hey, somebody will, they're gonna try to kill you and all that." So it was actually really profound when I think back on that. And he shared the story of Jesus, and he wrote it down. And he had the what's the phrase he always uses for the symbols?
Hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphics, like the arrow pointing down and the cross and the tomb and the arrow, coming back and the arrow coming back down as Jesus coming down. And so you can kind of figure out what that means about Jesus came to earth. He died. He's raised. He went to the right hand where he's at right now, and he's coming back. And so he handed the paper to President Trump, and he's like, you need to move on that. This needs to be the core of everything you do. I mean, it was very profound. So I say all that to say this one tidbit of the story. So later on, he came to Monroe, and I forgot exactly what was going on, but my family got involved, and I think Willie introduced.
It was when he was running in 2020 when he lost. It was that.
Okay, so
that next campaign.
So we're now fast forwarding 4 years. Well, my dad was there. I think my dad led a prayer at the event. We were all there. My whole family went. And this place, you could not stick another person in the Monroe Civic Center. Well, while Willie, I think, was introducing him, my dad was standing behind him, and President Trump pulled out of his pocket that same gospel presentation that my dad had given to him 4 years before.
Wow.
And he's like, I want you to know I still have this.
I hadn't forgotten.
It's beautiful. I hadn't forgotten. So I thought that made the story more powerful.
Yes.
In that, you can say what you want to about the gospel, but people don't just ignore it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very proud moment.
Yeah, and of course, in dad fashion, when he shook his hand, he had written a few more verses down. And when he shook Trump's hand, he handed him that. It was one of those handshakes where you got a little something in your hand.
Yeah.
And it was a few more verses just to consider.
Oh, yeah, that was true.
I love that.
Well, fast forward to him, surviving the assassination attempt. That's why it didn't shock me that all of a sudden, he started talking about God more. Yeah.
But he felt like God had raised him up for this.
Yeah, and I thought, well, it makes sense to me from where I'm looking at the sidelines of this encounter with my dad and understanding the gospel and really what people like us, that he first phrased, are all about. And I think he found his way, with a relationship with God in some capacity.
Allie, to your point, my dad has always had the same passion when he shares Jesus, as if just some guy that somebody brought that nobody could do anything with, that they would say, well, you know what, this guy, he's got nowhere else to turn. Let's get him to Phil. I heard that my whole life. He had just the same passion with that guy sitting in his living room next to Dad's chair as he did speaking to the President of the United States. With him, it doesn't matter. The stature of the person. Everybody has an opportunity. And so I think he showed that passion all the way.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that my dad's probably one of the few people that ever had a conversation with the president and didn't ask for anything. Nothing. He never said, by the way, why don't you get these game wardens off my back on the,
Why don't you talk to Canada and get some more ducks down there, whatever,
Right. Oh my goodness. I think that's probably part of why Trump respected him and probably responded as graciously as he did. One, I think Trump is an amenable person, but also I think there's something about Phil, which I think this is probably true of Jesus, that there's a meekness and humility about their appearance, but also confidence. And not a lot of people have that exact kind of balance, but I think that is part of what makes him so why people receive him so well, and why they will listen to the harsh truths, because even if it is harsh or even if it is blunt, it doesn't come across as judgment. It comes across as concern. I think we could all learn something from that, because I think that's, we all want to be full of grace and truth like Jesus was, and it's hard to do.
Yeah, and yet be loving. And you're right. People would come in, Dad say, all right, tell me a story. I know you've been messing up. I mean, that would be the lead. And they'd be like, well, yeah, Mr. Phil, they'd just start into it. But it was like they didn't take offense. I don't know. I guess if you thought about it, you took it into your pastor and they may be offended by this, but somehow Dad, just being who he was, and maybe it was the whole package, the beard and the hunting and his own story, it just always came across. We always compare it to John the Baptist, because John the Baptist was pretty rough around the edges. And he was pretty harsh at times, but you know what? He was who he was, and everybody seemed to appreciate that and respect that.
Well, that's what's been so different now, is I've seen my dad do things here in the last year in a soft kind of way that we've never seen, which my wife had an interesting conversation about this, because I kind of went through that upset stage, which really my upset stage was during duck season, because, you have to remember, we have duck hunted, and I'm saying my dad and I, we hunt every day of the duck season, 60 days, and we've done that since I was 8 years old. And so this year,
we're going on almost 50 years.
Yeah, this year, he went opening day, and he was miserable, and it wasn't that we didn't have a lot of ducks. It was the best day we had all year, but he didn't participate and he didn't say much. And I was like, after the hunt, I was like, we got off on the bank. I was like, Phil, what's wrong? And he's like, I just can't do it. He felt bad in the moment. I wasn't really sure what the problem was.
Yeah.
But so then the rest of the season, was just so hollow, because I literally on several occasions would go to speak to my dad, because if you've been hunting with somebody that long, you forget that they're not there. So that was kind of when I went through the sad part. And so at that time, my dad was, he told my wife he loved her. Well, he's never done that. It's not that he doesn't love her, but he's just not a touchy-feely guy. And and it meant the world to her. And I was like, well, it disturbs me. And she's like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? I was like, he's just not mentally right.
It's different.
And she got so upset with me about it. But I was like, but now I think I realized that it's him more, being a little softer in this kind of new normal situation that's.
And it's kind of been a process even before what he's going through now, because when we found Phyllis, who's Dad's daughter, actually she found us, he showed a tenderness and compassion to her that I had
Mm-hmm.
never seen him, that I didn't know he was capable of. And a friend of ours told us, she said, "Now look, you boys, you got raised in a certain home. He's going to be different towards her." And I thought, you don't know my dad,
Mm-hmm.
and she was exactly right. And I have daughters. Jase has a daughter. You're a daughter, Allie, and which, by the way, I know your dad. We've become fast friends since he was on our podcast. You and he were on our podcast. But it's, it was something special and unique. And so, God through his later years now is giving him a tenderness. He told me that the first time we visited him when he moved into town, he looked up at me and said, "Now keep visiting me. Don't stop visiting me."
Mm.
And I mean, it touched me because I thought,
Yeah,
he's never said that.
He doesn't normally say that.
I mean, he would
Right.
never say that. So you know what? Every time I'm in town, because at least I travel at, I've been right over there visiting,
Yeah.
talking to him, because I thought, you know what? He let me know it matters to him
Yeah.
at this point in his life.
Last sponsor is Preborn. There are pregnant women right now who are in crisis, who are considering aborting their baby, but instead of walking into a Planned Parenthood, we want them to walk into a Preborn. This is a network of clinics across the country that provide women with the resources that they need to understand what abortion is and to make a life-affirming decision. They offer free sonograms, free tools, free education, and also the abortion reversal pill, which saves the lives of those babies that the mom has tragically chosen to try to abort through the abortion pill. So they're truly saving lives, but they can only do this work through your donation. So whether you can donate $5 or $50,000, whatever it is, it counts and it goes towards saving a life. Go to preborn.com/Allie to donate. That's preborn.com/Allie.
It's so funny. We had brought up Trump. I thought of a funny story. I don't know if we've ever shared this. Maybe we have. I don't think so. But
It's breaking news.
maybe breaking news. So one time, the president, while he's president, actually calls my dad.
I was there.
But my dad was getting up to speak at an event, and so my dad, we've already described how he is. He's like, "Who is it?" It's like, "It's the president of the United States." He said, "Tell him I'll call him back. I'm fixed to preach Jesus," which was shocking to everyone, because who minds waiting 5 minutes? He was talking to the I mean, I would have like turned that into my icebreaker in the speech, but he didn't do it. And of course, then everybody was like, "Well, how are you going to call him back?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's a good point." How does that even happen?
Trump called him back
He
the
did.
next day
Wow.
and had a great conversation. We were in the car and really just congratulated Dad for his book and just talked about what an influence he was on the country. And, again, I
Wow.
think still just remembering the impact that who Dad was and the way he was. So, it was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. But who's not offended? And the president wasn't offended.
No.
He was like, well, because he understood. But I was getting back to that gospel presentation. I think he understood. Now, I'm just speculating. This is what my dad's all about.
Yeah.
And it's really, I don't care who you are. This is a life-threatening situation I'm in. This is an emergency. I'm fixing to share Jesus with these people. So call me back.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm curious about, we only have a few minutes left. I'm curious about the revamping of Duck Dynasty, the TV show. Like, who's going to be a part of it? And is it going to be strange without Phil, or was that always part of the plan? And what's that going to be like?
Well, I can comment on that because I wasn't sure myself. And I felt like the first time Duck Dynasty happened, everybody was talking about this. Of course, me and my dad were saying this will never work because they were saying, let's make a show about your family, but we're not going to shoot any ducks.
Because all we'd ever done was hunting shows and hunting videos.
Yeah, to put it in context, we had done actual hunting videos, and so where ducks were like shown in like real life hunting. I was like, who would watch that? Nobody we know. I mean, we do hunting shows, we don't family shows, so that's not gonna work. But so I, the day they showed up, I thought, well, they're doing it. Well, so I had heard that there might be a version of Duck Dynasty coming back. And I didn't believe it until I saw it. But then when I saw the camera show up, I thought, well, they're back because it's a mighty throng of them. And so basically what's happened is because the number one question we get before my dad and before now, oh, yeah, is Duck Dynasty? I heard it's coming back.
And another one is Cy still alive because he's been dead like 4 times.
That's another
we
rumor
just had him
we
on the
need to
podcast.
put. Well, there's another recent post saying
He's still
Cy's
kicking, but
gone on to be with the Lord, and Cy's like, "Hey, Jack, not yet." But so that's not true, wherever that's coming from. But so what I was gonna say, long story to say, the question is, people say, "Well, when are y'all gonna come back on TV?" But what they fail to realize is, Duck Dynasty, as much as you realize it's a TV show and the TV people plan a lot of what we did, that was our life. Everything you saw was
actually
real.
happening.
I worked at Duck Command. Like when the cameras would leave, I would be building duck calls.
Yeah.
It wasn't. So, well, since then, we all have our own families that are huge.
Yeah.
And so
we can't even all meet
I
together.
mean, I'm not built. I'm technically an employee of Duck Commander. They send me a check, but they're doing that so my face can be on their packaging, but I'm not in the room building duck calls anymore. So most of Willie's kids, I think all of them in some capacity, work at
working
Duck
here,
Commander.
right?
And so I think they
are doing podcasts.
Yeah, the TV people got wind of that, and they're like, well, it's a whole. And they're having to deal with people like me, Willie's kids, because I'm officially, I get to tell them what to do and whatever. And so it's kind of a reboot on that. It's like the next generation. And all the family, I think, will make a cameo appearance in some capacity. I haven't been filmed yet, but I had a meeting with them. So I'll appear.
I know Mom's been on an episode, Cy's been on an episode.
And actually, you said my dad, I guess I can say this. I think you will see my dad at some point.
Yeah,
so,
somewhere.
Yeah. So
where's Waldo to find him? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
But
well,
like in all
exciting.
TV shows, we have no control over the edit. So.
Right. Well, thank you all so much for this. And I could listen to y'all talk all day, but I just appreciate the remembrance of just the legacy that your dad is still leaving, but has left, and how y'all are really his missives. And that's a really beautiful thing, and something that, gosh, I aspire to as a parent. So thank y'all for that, and just how y'all honor him so much. There's so many people in this audience, and obviously y'all's audience, but this audience too, who have been impacted. I have friends who have heard the gospel for the first time from Phil. So I just appreciate him and your mom so much. Because like you said, hospitality, that is a huge Jesus trait that, I aspire to embody too.
I want to say to your audience that, and I know they love you, you're one of our favorite people in media. You're amazing because not only are you there with cutting edge what's going on politically and culturally, but also you're a Bible warrior like we are. And of course, I follow you on social media. I love your mom and dad. They become friends of mine. So what you're doing is making an impact on the kingdom. So thank you for that. We're honored to be on your podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thanks for taking the time to come on.
Absolutely.
No problem.